There we see a wreck, and there we see something there. And then this thing popping up on the screen.
For more than 10 years, people around the world have asked the same question. What is really hiding at the bottom of the Baltic Sea? Deep under the cold, dark water sits a giant, strange object that many believe should not exist. Some say it is just rock. Others think it could be an ancient machine, a secret war project, or something not from Earth at all. Now, after decades of silence, Dennis Asberg is finally speaking about the shocking new discoveries and strange experiences. What did his team really find beneath the sea? And why does it still scare experts today? Join us as we dive beneath the surface to reveal what Dennis Asberg has been keeping to himself all this time. The discovery that changed everything. In June of 2011, a small team of Swedish treasure hunters set out across the Gulf of Bothnia, the stretch of cold and narrow water that sits between Sweden and Finland. And what they were looking for had nothing unusual about it at all, at least not at first. The team, known as the Ocean X Team, had built their reputation searching for valuable shipwrecks, particularly old bottles of champagne that had been preserved in remarkable condition by the cold, low salinity water that makes the Baltic Sea an unusually good place for keeping ancient things intact, and this expedition began in exactly the same way as all the others. They were using a piece of equipment called a side-scan sonar, which sends sound waves down through the water and uses the way those waves bounce back to build a picture of whatever is sitting on the ocean floor, and for a while, the screen showed them nothing out of the ordinary. Then the picture changed. A massive circular shape appeared on the sonar screen, roughly 197 feet across and sitting approximately 295 feet below the surface. And it did not look like any shipwreck the team had ever come across. It looked symmetrical, geometric, and deliberately formed in a way that natural objects on the ocean floor simply do not tend to be. Behind the object, the sonar revealed a long track stretching back across the seabed for approximately 300 yards, as though the object had at some point been dragged or had moved across the bottom under its own power. Dennis Asberg and the Ocean X team released the sonar images publicly, and within days the story had spread around the world, but the images alone were only the beginning. What the team would find when they went back down was something nobody had prepared for. Return to the bottom. A year after the initial discovery, the Ocean X team returned to the site with a more substantial set of resources, bringing with them professional divers, high-definition cameras, and advanced survey equipment designed to give them a much clearer picture of what was sitting on the ocean floor beneath them. The problems began before the divers even entered the water. Satellite phones that had been working perfectly stopped functioning as soon as the vessel reached the coordinates of the anomaly. Sonar screens began to fail without explanation, and electronic systems that should have been operating normally started behaving in ways the crew could not account for, only to restore themselves completely once the boat moved a significant distance away from the site. When the divers finally descended toward the object, what they encountered did not match the rock formations they had been expecting to find, because the surfaces they came across were flat and smooth in a way that natural geology rarely produces, and the angles they observed were sharp and deliberate, including what appeared to be stair-like formations and corridor-shaped passages that seemed far too structured to have been created by any natural process. At the center of the object, the divers found a depression that some of them compared to a hatch or an opening, surrounded by circular markings that appeared darkened, as though they had been exposed to intense heat or coated in a layer of soot that had settled there over a very long period of time. The divers also reported feeling a persistent unease while near the object, describing vibrations and a psychological discomfort that was difficult to explain and harder to shake off once they had surfaced. A second smaller object was also reportedly located nearby, though that detail would raise as many questions as everything else they had found. What was causing the equipment to fail, and was anyone else already aware of what was down there? The silent signal zone. One of the strangest parts of the entire Baltic Sea anomaly story is not what divers saw when they went down. It is what happened to their equipment every single time they got close. Reports began emerging that something near the anomaly was interfering with electronics in ways that nobody could easily explain. Cameras cut to static. Dive computers started behaving erratically. Remote underwater vehicles lost function the moment they approached the site, then recovered completely once they were moved roughly 200 yards away. Satellite phones that worked perfectly on the surface went dead above the coordinates. OceanX documented these malfunctions repeatedly across multiple visits. And the pattern was consistent enough that researchers began developing a theory. Something beneath the water, they argued, was emitting an electromagnetic field strong enough to disrupt modern technology at close range. Sub-bottom profiling added another layer of confusion. Results suggested the object may be resting on soft sediment rather than connecting directly to the bedrock below, which raised questions about where it came from and how it arrived in that specific spot. Rumors began circulating about footage that had never been released to the public, recordings allegedly showing metallic corridor-like structures inside the anomaly that OceanX had chosen not to share. Nobody could confirm or deny what that footage actually contained. Then came claims connected to data gathered as recently as 2025 and 2026, suggesting the signal was not fading over time, but may actually be growing stronger. If accurate, that detail changed the nature of the mystery entirely. And quietly, another question began forming in the background. If researchers with basic equipment had detected all of this, what had governments and military organizations already discovered long before the OceanX team ever arrived? The military shadow. The Baltic Sea has never been a peaceful place. During the Second World War, it became one of the most heavily militarized stretches of water in the entire world, and the history buried beneath its surface is darker and more complicated than most people realize. When researchers began looking more carefully at the anomaly, some of them turned their attention toward that wartime history, and what they found opened up a very different line of thinking. Nazi Germany had been deeply invested in experimental technology during the war, developing projects that pushed far beyond conventional weapons research. Rumors had long circulated about secret underwater installations in the Baltic region, experimental submarine designs, and radar jamming systems that the German military had been testing in remote northern waters. The anomaly's location sat uncomfortably close to areas where some of that alleged activity was said to have taken place. The shape of the object itself drew comparisons to a classified Nazi program known as the Bell, a rumored experimental device whose exact purpose has never been confirmed, but which has been connected to theories about unconventional energy systems and anti-gravity research. Metallic traces of iron and manganese found near the site added fuel to the speculation. The long track running across the seabed behind the object was interpreted by some researchers as a launch path or a drag mark left behind when something was deliberately moved or deployed. Then came the reports that felt harder to dismiss. Multiple expedition members claimed to have observed unmarked vessels in the area with no visible identification, boats that appeared to be monitoring the site without explanation. Whether those boats belonged to a government, a private organization, or something else entirely was never established. But the idea that powerful forces were already watching raised a question that pointed in a completely different direction. What if the answer had nothing to do with modern history at all? A lost structure beneath the Ice Age. To understand this theory properly, it helps to picture the Baltic Sea not as it looks today, but as it looked thousands of years ago, because it did not always look the way it does now. During the last Ice Age, vast amounts of water were locked up in glaciers across the northern hemisphere, and sea levels around the world were dramatically lower than they are today. The land that now sits beneath the Gulf of Bothnia was once dry ground, part of a much larger landmass that stretched across what is now northern Europe. People lived there. Animals roamed there. And according to some researchers, something may have been built there. The theory that emerged around the Baltic Sea anomaly suggested that the object might not be a shipwreck, a military installation, or a geological formation at all. It might be the remains of a structure built by people who lived in that region before the ice melted and the waters rose, burying everything beneath the surface. Divers pointed to features that seemed difficult to explain as natural: flat surfaces, right-angled edges, stair-like formations, and what appeared to be corridor structures all suggested geometry that nature does not typically produce on its own. Comparisons were drawn to megalithic architecture, the kind of ancient stone construction found at sites across Europe that still puzzles researchers today. Sonar scans of the surrounding area reportedly revealed additional wall-like formations and straight pathways nearby, hinting that the anomaly might not be a single isolated object, but part of something much larger. Claims also surfaced that rock samples taken from the site contained basalt that was not native to the region, suggesting the material had been brought there deliberately from somewhere else entirely. If any of that was true, the implications were difficult to overstate. But not everyone was willing to accept it, and the scientific community had a great deal to say in response. Scientific skepticism. While theories about Nazi technology, ancient civilizations, and electromagnetic signals were spreading rapidly across the internet, the scientific community was taking a very different view, and their arguments were harder to dismiss than many people wanted to admit. Marine geologists who studied the sonar images pointed to a straightforward explanation. The Baltic Sea sits on some of the oldest rock formations in Europe, shaped over millions of years by glacial activity that left behind unusual and sometimes dramatic formations on the seabed. Ice Age glaciers are capable of carving and depositing enormous amounts of rock in patterns that can look surprisingly geometric when viewed through a sonar screen. Granite, sandstone, and gneiss samples recovered from the site matched rock types found naturally across the region. Scientists argued that the symmetry people found so striking was largely a product of low-resolution sonar technology, which tends to simplify complex surfaces in ways that make natural formations appear more deliberate than they actually are. The human brain, researchers pointed out, is wired to find patterns and recognize familiar shapes even when none are intentionally present. Applied to an unusual sonar image at the bottom of a dark sea, that instinct becomes extremely powerful. Critics also noted that despite multiple expeditions over more than a decade, no confirmed metallic hull had been recovered, no verified interior access achieved, and no evidence of artificial engineering independently documented by any qualified scientific body. The explanations were logical and well supported, and yet for millions of people following the story, they somehow did not feel like enough. Because just as scientists were making their case, the man who started it all was about to complicate everything with a new set of claims. Dennis Asberg's new claims. Dennis Asberg had been living with the anomaly for years by the time he began speaking more openly about what the Ocean X team had gathered during their most recent expeditions, and what he described did not sound like a team that had accepted the geological explanation and moved on. Åsberg began discussing newer scans and survey data collected well into 2026, and the picture he painted was unsettling. He claimed the object appeared to have shifted slightly in position on the seabed since the original discovery, a detail that immediately separated it from any static natural rock formation. Rocks, as a general rule, do not move. He also described internal structures that seemed to change configuration between visits, corridor-like shapes that did not appear identical across different scans taken years apart. Whether that reflected actual physical change or differences in scanning technology was impossible to confirm. Energy readings near the site had remained consistently active throughout years of monitoring, and more recent data suggested those readings were not weakening. Low-frequency sounds had allegedly been detected near the object, described by team members as a faint but persistent humming with no obvious natural source. Åsberg was open about the fact that the public had not seen everything the team had collected. Footage existed, he suggested, that had never been released, and the reasons for withholding it were left deliberately vague. That combination of partial disclosure and deliberate mystery sent speculation in every direction, and one particular community had already made up their mind entirely about what the anomaly truly was. The alien theory. It was perhaps inevitable that a disc-shaped object sitting at the bottom of a northern sea, interfering with electronics and defying easy explanation, would eventually attract the UFO research community. And once it did, the theories that followed were unlike anything the Ocean X team had previously encountered. Researchers in the extraterrestrial field pointed to features they argued were impossible to explain through geology or military history. The disk shape matched the most commonly reported profile of unidentified aerial objects documented across decades of witness accounts. The electromagnetic interference fit patterns associated with alleged UFO encounters on land. The burn marks around the central depression suggested extreme heat, the kind generated by propulsion rather than geological processes. Some theorists went further, suggesting the object might be actively transmitting signals into the water above it, possibly communicating with something beyond the reach of human detection equipment. Others proposed the Baltic Sea had been deliberately chosen as a hiding place, deep and remote enough to remain undisturbed across a very long period of time. More extreme theories describe the anomaly as partially organic, existing on the boundary between machine and living material, capable of self-repair over time. None of it was ever independently verified. No recovered material confirmed extraterrestrial origin. No signal was traced to a non-human source. But for many people, the absence of proof only deepened the conviction that something extraordinary was being deliberately hidden and that pressure was beginning to affect everyone connected to the story in ways nobody had anticipated. Psychological pressure and global obsession. What began as a treasure-hunting expedition in the Gulf of Bothnia had grown into something far beyond anything Dennis Asberg or his team had ever anticipated, and the weight of that transformation was becoming very visible. Ocean X members had become recognizable figures in the global mystery community, their names attached to one of the most debated underwater discoveries in modern history. Alongside genuine curiosity came ridicule from commentators who dismissed the story as fabrication. And alongside support came obsessive followers demanding answers the team simply did not have. Allegations of hoaxing surfaced regularly, with critics arguing the anomaly had been exaggerated for financial gain and media attention. Those accusations took a real toll. Team members spoke about the psychological difficulty of being associated with a story that attracted passionate believers and deeply hostile skeptics in equal measure. Divers who had descended to the object described effects that lingered long after returning to the surface, an unease that was difficult to put into words, and for some, a growing compulsion to understand something that refused to reveal itself clearly. Online, the anomaly had taken on a life completely independent of the people who discovered it. Communities formed around competing theories, growing more entrenched with every passing year despite no new confirmed evidence emerging to settle anything. The mystery had grown larger than the object itself, and the weight of that realization sat heavily on everyone involved. But through all the noise, all the pressure, and all the unanswered questions, one thing remained constant. The object was still down there, and the truth was still waiting to be found. The truth beneath the Baltic. More than a decade has passed since that sonar image first appeared on a screen aboard an Ocean X vessel in the Gulf of Bothnia, and the Baltic Sea anomaly remains exactly what it was on the day it was discovered unexplained. Every theory that has been proposed across the years carries something compelling and something incomplete. The geological explanation is logical, and well supported, but it struggles to account for the electronic interference, the reported movement, and the geometric precision that multiple divers described after physically approaching the object. The military theory fits the wartime history of the region, but no verified evidence of Nazi construction or classified installation has ever been recovered from the site. The ancient civilization theory is fascinating and not entirely without foundation, given what science already accepts about how dramatically sea levels changed at the end of the last ice age. But extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that evidence has never materialized in a form that satisfies independent scrutiny. The extraterrestrial theory captures the imagination more than any other, but imagination alone has never been enough to confirm what something actually is. What the anomaly has revealed most clearly is not the truth about the object itself, but the truth about the people examining it. It has shown how differently human beings respond to the unknown, some reaching for the most dramatic explanation available, others retreating to the most conservative one, and very few remaining comfortable with simple uncertainty. Most of Earth's oceans remain largely unexplored, and the Baltic Sea alone still hides thousands of wrecks, formations, and objects that have never been examined. Future expeditions with better technology may eventually settle the question. Until that day comes, a silent and perfectly circular object continues to rest in the darkness beneath one of the world's busiest seas, waiting. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.